When I started my own consulting firm, which was now almost 2.5 years ago, I thought a lot about where I could add the most value.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Leadership Cafe podcast. We are thrilled you're with us. Okay, so healthcare marketing peeps, get your notepad. You're going to want to take some notes here. But these concepts we're talking about today really apply to all marketers and every kind of organization who is interested in making more impact and having better connection within your work. So today we get to talk to Laila Waggoner. She is a Chief Doc Connector at Strategy for Hire. I love your title. She has more than 35 years of experience in marketing leadership at agencies, health systems, and other industries. And she's developed very deep expertise in strategic healthcare marketing through regional systems, community hospitals, academic medical centers, managed care organizations, associations, and a lot of B2B brands across the country. She's a new member of the advisory board for the Society for Healthcare Strategy and Marketing Development. We lovingly refer to as SHISMED. It's the marketing arm of the American Hospital Association, and she presents at conferences frequently and provides strategic consulting to select partners. And Laila and I met at one of those industry conferences, and I think the strategy geek in me instantly connected to the strategy geek in her, our shared love of human-centric marketing and leadership. And I know that you will find what I have, that she's a fabulous professional, but even a better human. So thank you for being here with us, Laila.
Thank you, Sally. It's
I'm
great to
really
be here. I've been looking forward to joining you on the Leadership Cafe.
I'm excited. We have episodes dropping every other week, and so it's exciting to see people starting to catch on because we're pretty new, but we have months of content ready for you already, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's great.
So you and I have talked plenty about building effective strategies for marketing, and we both agree how important the marketing profession is within an organization. Sometimes in our work, we come across folks who don't recognize how important their role is. It's so beyond tactics and posts and event planning. And when I got my first hospital marketing role, I got introduced to that department as the milk and cookies department. And I have set off in my professional purview to eliminate that thinking about marketing going
I
forward.
mean, we like milk and cookies, but yeah, we'd like to think
Exactly.
it's a little more than that. Yeah.
Yes, there's so much power to marketing. And, even just as an aside, I have an undergraduate degree in therapy. I was a care provider to start with. And I found as much impact through the role of marketing and communications and strategy in healthcare to help connect a patient to what's available to them. It's equal of a passion as it was giving the direct care because it's so powerful. So I'm excited about our conversation
Yeah.
today.
Me
But
too.
first of all, Chief Dot Connector, love the title, love it, love it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what kind of work you do and how you're informing strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Sally. So when I started my own consulting firm, which was now almost 2.5 years ago, I thought a lot about where I could add the most value. And as you mentioned, I have a very long history of working, as you can see. This is the evidence of that. I always say I had jet black hair when I started in this industry, and I was 5'10", and now I'm 4'10", and you can see what it's jet black. But I really honed in on where I think kind of the through line of my career has been, which is on the strategy side and particularly strategic marketing. And when I thought about my title, when you start your own business, you think founder, CEO, president. Those are all great and correct and accurate. But I wanted it to be a little bit more descriptive. And so I named my business Strategy for Hire because I looked at what I offer as an opportunity for organizations and agencies to access the kind of experience and depth of expertise that is sometimes hard to carry full time within an organization, and frankly, not necessarily required on a full-time basis, but it's nice to be able to have access to that level of experience or
Mm.
that perspective, frankly.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of where I focus my services, is really providing insight, providing leadership, sometimes helping to launch an initiative,
Mhm.
helping to provide guidance,
Mhm.
advisory service,
Mhm.
helping to think through from the front end a new initiative,
Right.
helping to analyze research and look at the insights from that research. All of these things are not necessarily things that tasks or goals that your own team can't do, but
Right.
often it would be a distraction from what their regular job is.
Right.
Or you only need it for a short period of time, and either you don't have the expertise in-house, or like I said, the team is busy. They've got other things to do. They have full-time jobs. And so to be able to bring someone in to help guide that work can be really, really helpful. So that's the kind of work I do. And then the Chief Dot Connector title is one where I really looked at what is it that I fundamentally do for people. And for me, to me, strategy is about both recognizing the things we have to pay attention to, whether those are data points, whether those are insights, whether those are people, and looking for those patterns and then literally connecting them.
Yes.
So that, if you look at a field full of dots, there's a lot of different directions where those dots can get connected, and you could maybe have different outcomes depending on what you see as those connections. And so my
Sure.
job is to really help spot the patterns
Mhm.
based on an organization's goals or a stated objective, and then help chart that path forward, help create a roadmap. And then typically I will then turn it back over to
Mhm.
the internal team to execute, or to an agency,
Mhm.
or help direct that work
Mm.
if required. But I'm not really in the execution mode. So
Sure.
that's
Sure.
my story.
I love the way you've articulated it, because having worked for 20, 25 years in healthcare, in systems, in a managed care organization, we've had a lot of consultants come and help. But I also feel like, and now I'm on the other side, helping healthcare entities, I feel like sometimes we lose sight of certain perspectives and connecting certain dots because we're in our own echo chamber all the time. And so,
Very
to
true.
me, having been on both sides of that table, the value comes from objectivity to see the whole picture. And I've seen that even this week with a rural health system we're working with. It's like pulling all this body of information together and just getting it into a consumable piece was like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, they had a ton of ideas based on one slide of the progress we're making. And I think that that's really such a benefit of whether you're listening to a podcast or reading another book or working with an outside frame of reference. I feel like sometimes those observations illuminate things that maybe we didn't recognize or got used to. Seems like
Well,
everybody knows about it already.
that's so true. And the other thing that I'll say out loud, because I know I've sat in the same seat, right, inside
Mhm.
health systems as well as on the agency side. And frustrating as it might be, sometimes it takes an outside voice for people
Yeah.
to listen.
Yeah.
And so it can be very affirming.
Yeah.
It can be frustrating, but it can also be affirming, and it can be galvanizing to bring someone in that can help you make the case or articulate more clearly, what the vision is, and lay
Sure.
out those roadmaps. So that's
Sure.
another perspective, right? Is that it's often not that we don't necessarily know what to do, but getting the time and the space and, like you said, the perspective to be able to do the work, focused work of making a business case for it, or, pulling together all of those supporting pieces of information that are required. The right thing to do often, but having the discipline or having the space even to just get that
Yes.
work done is not always easy to do. So that's another, I think, service that agencies do very well, that other consultants do very well. And it's something that I really enjoy as well.
Yeah.
And I think I do it well. So that's, yeah.
Yes. Yes. So let's start we're going to start kind of broad and then narrow in. But let's start with some of your observations or insights from your work across the industry for healthcare strategy. And, our audience is healthcare, nonprofits, kind of small solo teams.
Yep.
What are some of the observations you're seeing about the state of marketing strategy right now? Is there any kind of constant themes you're pulling or things you see a lot?
Yeah, I think that, and I think this is true particularly for healthcare, although I'm seeing it in other industries as well. And that's something that I do try to do, is keep looking not just inside our own industry, but at other industries to make sure that
Mhm.
we're learning from what
Yes.
else is happening in the world, right? We've
Right.
all benefited from thinking, for
Mm.
example, about the growing importance of the consumer and how does that apply
Yes.
looking outside. But I do think, healthcare in particular is under incredible pressure.
Yes.
And often what will happen in those scenarios, and I've seen those waves come and go over many, many decades. And I'll say this is a unique time, but the situation is not necessarily unique,
Right.
right? The
Right. Well,
idea that we're under
history
pressure.
is very circular.
It is. It is. It's cyclical, it's circular, and marketing is under the kind of pressure now to produce results, to be very, very we're being pressurized, and the instinct or the tendency might be to get super tactical as a result,
Mm.
right? To really
Right.
focus in on the what of what
Yeah.
we're doing, right? There's pressure to do that. There's pressure to,
Yep.
we hear this all the time, do more with less, do more with the same if you're lucky, but certainly you're not getting more to try new things. So there's just all of this pressure. And I would argue that it's easy to set strategy aside, but that the challenge for us and the opportunity for us
Mm.
is to ensure that we're still being strategic
Right.
about the way we go about our work. And so even if we're being constrained by budget, that's actually when a strategy can be most helpful,
Yes.
because it can help you make choices
Mhm.
and decide. I always say strategies as it's really what are you saying no to, right?
Right.
It's not about expanding necessarily. It's about narrowing in so that
Mm.
you can have a bigger impact.
Sure.
And I think that the instinct is sometimes to get very tactical and to
Mhm.
focus on the what. And I would urge folks to continue to ask yourself why and how, because
Right.
the how matters
Right.
in not just the short term, but the long term. You can be more strategic with that constrained spend. And it forces you to frankly get more creative, to
Sure.
really, challenge yourself and your teams to say, what can we do without? What
Right.
could we do differently? How else could we achieve this particular objective? What
Right.
and then that leads you really to being asking those deeper questions. Well, wait a minute. What are we actually trying to accomplish, right? Because we get very kind of in that habit of, well, this is what we're measuring and we have trending data, so we have to keep looking at the same data. Well, what's it really telling us? What's it
Right.
really achieving for us? Are these still the right priorities? Should we be narrowing in our focus? And the more strategic you can get about the marketing function, I think you have a better opportunity than to make a case for having an impact on the organization, because you're aligning to those organizational objectives and
Yes.
you're saying no, but with good reason, right? You've got
Right.
your rationale there. You can point to it and say, well, actually, this is what we're focused on. This is how we're aligning our work. If we need to adapt, for sure, we can do that, but then something else has to give, right? And
Sure.
it's not just a opinion-based,
Yes.
exercise at that point. It's based in data. It's based
Oh,
in
so good.
evidence. Yeah.
Amen, girl. It's funny because we work with some smaller critical access hospitals, rural health systems, nonprofits. I see a lot of the same exact behavior where marketing is either one or the other. It's aware of and totally connected to the key business objectives of the whole organization. And they're aligned and they know it. They've got ideas And, typically those are the types that are like the rising stars that get awarded and all that. And then there's this other camp of folks who are so busy, to your point, in the tactical doing of marketing things that they don't take the time to really understand, what is that thumb on the back of my boss? What is
How are they
is
being
that
evaluated? Yeah.
person accountable for, and how is my work rising that tide for them? And I find there's a few in the middle who are trying to find their way, and maybe this episode is for them. But we tell clients a lot, it's not time to do more with less, it's time to do better with less. Because the more it kind of came out of the COVID era where everyone had to pivot right now to make money and keep their doors open.
Mhm.
Okay, the restaurants now have curbside pickup, this kind of hurry, 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 keep us alive mentality. And I think it's kind of always existed in healthcare. But truly, the organizations that came out of that scenario successfully were those who balanced that immediate need for activity with still maintaining a longer view to strategy, to brand awareness, to impact. And I love the advice about making sure you don't get so busy that all that gets pushed off, because at the end of the day, if you all your energy goes to right now impact, in 5 years when you need to really call on brand recall, or in a year they're going to be like, who's that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is challenging, though, and I want to acknowledge that it's not
Mhm.
simple,
Mhm.
particularly if you've been in your role for a while, and particularly if leadership has a particular vision of
Mhm.
marketing or a
Yes,
perception about marketing. It's hard. It's
it
hard
is.
to shift perspectives and understanding to go from milk and cookies,
Right.
or party planner or order taker, frankly,
Yes.
to strategic partner. And I'm not suggesting that it's as easy as flipping a switch, but
Right.
starting to sort of ingrain different kinds of questions, being willing to push back a little bit, bringing value to the table, looking
Yeah.
outside of your own organization for the kind of information that can be meaningful, asking really, really good questions. I mean,
Yes.
fundamentally, your job is ultimately going to be about having some answers,
Mhm.
but you don't have to start there. You start with those questions and start
Right.
with really listening to, seeking to understand. And per your comment, Sally, I think that's the fundamental mistake, I think, or miss that often marketers will do is not pausing to say, we do it all the time with our audiences, but we don't necessarily think about our colleagues as audiences and
Right.
apply the same thinking of what do they care about? How are
Right.
they going to measure whether or not, how are they being evaluated? What are their KPIs? And how
True.
can I align mine to theirs so that they see that I'm sitting next to them in this venture, not across from them, right? I'm
True.
not either saying no to things, I'm saying, here's how we can do that, or
Right.
let me better understand what it is you're trying to accomplish. Say more about that. Like
Mm.
right? You talked about therapy, but one of the very best lines you can do is just say more about that. Tell me
Uh,
a little bit more about that.
uh-huh.
Because getting them talking, then you get that aha moment of like, oh, this is what's worrying them, or this is
Yes.
what they're really hoping to accomplish. And then you can look at it and say, all right, well, how can we do that? Are there ways that we can do that?
True.
Um, Maybe not necessarily even by spending money. Sometimes it's just about, getting some internal recognition. That's what they were really hoping for. Or, what are all the tools in your toolbox that are available to accomplish those goals? But also connecting them then back to, well, tell me about how that connects to the business or how that connects to,
Mhm.
what we're trying to accomplish as an organization. So
It's so good. So let's talk to the person who's like, oh, how do I even start? So, how do they begin to think more strategically about their role in marketing? Like, what are some of those questions they need to ask? Or what would you advise is the first steps for them to begin to shift from a order taker to an impactful leader within the organization?
again, I think this is a little bit has to get tweaked a little bit depending how long you've been there, what,
Mhm.
the dynamics, etc. I
Yeah.
would say that some very natural opportunities to begin this sort of work are if there's new leadership. And it
Mm.
doesn't have to be at the very top, right? It doesn't have to be a new CEO necessarily. But if there's a new leader that comes into the organization that you know is going to be influential, and I would say, ideally, you're doing this annually anyway, but have a series of listening meetings, right?
Mhm.
Have a series of questions that you're trying to better understand, big picture of the organization, how their role fits into that, what it is that they're worried about, what it is they're excited about, how it all connects. It's not necessarily a marketing conversation. It's a business conversation, and it's
Right,
a getting to know you conversation, and it's
right.
starting to build some relationship there and some dialogue. And don't necessarily feel as though you have to walk in with answers. You're actually just walking in with questions. And if you get
Sure.
some of those questions posed right back at you, especially if it's somebody who's trying to, you know,
Yeah.
feel their oats or,
Prove themselves, yes.
try to establish their own strength. It's okay to say, that's a really interesting question, or I would like to research that a little bit before I answer that, or I'd like to go and check my sources on that so that I can give you better information about that. Like,
Mm.
it's okay to not have to feel the pressure to respond immediately
Right,
to a given question, right?
right.
But thinking about what those questions are, helping them to encourage them to articulate what the challenges are, but
Mhm.
not just the challenges, what are the opportunities that they see? And then
Right,
looking at the thread that runs, right? Sometimes an organization doesn't even have a big picture strategic plan, right?
right.
It really very much depends. If there is one, for sure, ask to see it. Ask to
Yeah,
be, if you're not at the table when those things are being discussed, you're not gonna immediately get invited to it from the
right.
front end, but ask to see it.
Yeah.
Tell, whoever it is, "I'd really like to better understand, where we're headed as an organization.
Mhm.
What resources can you point me to that I can get myself better educated?" Like, I
Sure.
don't think people are gonna say no to that.
Yeah.
So really starting to do that, and then also at the same time, getting to know the organization and the individuals within the organization, and then connecting the dots to
Mhm.
what can you learn or what can you find out about your market, the
Yes.
service lines that are really critical to your organization, what are the resources out there, what do you have access to, what is public information, what are some, for sure organizations like Shishmid, conferences like HMPS. That's not always easy to get the funding to go to those things, but
Mm.
often there are some accessible resources, webinars that you can attend, newsletters that you can be reading, really getting a sense of what's happening in the industry and also in the larger marketing world, in the larger consumer world, and applying some of that thinking to, hey, you may have a very small team, you may not have a team at all, but
Right.
create your own team. If you don't have a team, if you're a solo, you're the person
Mhm.
and you're expected to do it all, create your own little I who was I ta I ca I'm trying to I wanna make sure I'm attributing properly. Um, I think it's Nicole Ramirez, who I follow on LinkedIn, who has just these fabulous posts, but she talked about assembling your own little board of directors.
Mhm.
I call it, and I did not make this up, but I can't remember who used this phrase, but your kitchen cabinet, right?
Mm.
Like, who is it that you can bounce ideas off of
Right.
or ask for input or ask for
Yep.
insight? Reach out to colleagues,
Yep.
and see what they're thinking. It helps you sharpen your own thinking when
For
you're
sure.
able to collaborate.
For sure. And I'll do a little shameless plug here for the
Please.
Leadership Cafe because
Yes,
we
exactly.
have we have currently almost 60 professionals in nonprofits, in healthcare, and in small business from all across the globe, literally. And I feel like when my career really started to take off was when I did exactly what you're saying. When I heard the CMO of Verizon talk about their customer experience challenges, and cell phones were way down at the bottom of the list next to banks. Some of the most hated industry, and what they were doing to turn things around. And I think that some of those, just getting out of our box, our echo chamber, and learning from other industry, other professionals. I'm constantly reading. Even this morning was reading a book that was like, oh, well, yeah, I can apply that to my business right now. And I want to create an SOP about this. And I want to add this bit to our sales cycle. And oh, here's an idea for better content. And so I think that that's really important. And we don't, sometimes I feel like, at least in my career when I was in those chairs, still today too, but I try to block a little time that gives me
Yes.
permission to
Yes.
do that. Because if you don't prioritize it,
It never
it will
happens.
never happen and you'll be ragged on both ends and like, how in the world can I spend 45 minutes at a webinar or
Yep.
online chatting with folks? I think it's really sage advice for
Yeah.
people. And honestly, I've started as a part-time temporary marketing specialist when at the top of my career, I was a vice president at a Fortune 100 healthcare company. So it's like, it's possible.
Yeah.
I didn't have the whole pedigree. I
Yep.
had a healthcare provider degree. I got my marketing and leadership insight after I had the job because I thought, well, I might not be able to get another job like this. So, but really, really important to do. So, if folks don't have relationships internal within the organization, can you just speak to a little bit about how important in your career or in your work now, IT or HR, ops, or places that not a lot of people just naturally gravitate to? That's not mine. I
Yep.
don't like numbers, so I don't talk to the finance person, but talk about some of those relationships internal and how might people go about beginning to build those relationships?
I can't say enough about how influential those relationships can
Mhm.
be, not just in terms of influence, if you will, right? And building kind of support, but frankly, just in learning. Like,
Yes.
forget about, set aside, the benefit of
Mhm.
building those relationships. You will learn so much more
Mhm.
about how the organization functions, how the organization makes money,
Mhm.
why all volume is not created equal, for
Right.
example. Like, that was a lesson, right? That, like, after you hear it, you're like, well, of course. But
Right.
so often we are so busy just trying to get the clicks and get the leads and get somebody to, butts in beds, as we
Mhm.
used to say. And we didn't pause at all to think about, does it matter what kind of
Yes, it does.
person that we're reaching, or what are our priorities, right? Hey,
Right.
we're a population health organization. We are a value-based care organization.
Right.
We will benefit, and the community will benefit and the population will benefit if we can improve people's, oh, well, that gives you rationale to come forward with a plan or a strategy
Right.
to improve health and education, even if it doesn't necessarily directly drive visits, right? So
Right.
understanding how we get compensated, understanding what our payer mix is, for sure, relationships with clinical folks. Yes, of course, we need our SMEs.
Yes.
We need their respect and it's worth it to have them understand what we're trying to do and why,
Correct.
and to base what we're doing in evidence in the same way that they do their
Yes.
work, right? I used to always love to say, I'd go into a meeting with a group of docs and I'd say, just as you practice evidence-based medicine, we practice evidence-based marketing.
Yeah.
And so this is not about an opinion about whether you like this word or don't like this word. We have
Right.
the research that shows why this is a good idea.
Yeah.
And we will be measuring it and we will be,
Yep.
reviewing it, and I will be reporting back.
Love
And,
it.
that kind of thing over time gets them to be like, "Oh, okay, I'm not just arguing with you as a person or arguing with with the creative." I'm like, "Oh, now I'm arguing with data.
Yeah.
That is not necessarily worth my time." And like, "Oh, I didn't realize that there was a reason for this."
Yes.
So, even just getting to know them enough that you can have a conversation about something other than either being defensive, that they don't like something, or why certain tactics don't make sense. Why that, I used to say, if you're seeing the advertising, I'm not doing my job very well because you're not my target audience, right?
Right.
Being able to say something like that with confidence. But that's why I'm here showing it to you today, because I want you to know that it's out there. And I
Yeah.
want you to know that your patients will be seeing this. And this is the promise that's being delivered. And we know you do such a great job with those patients that they're going to feel great when they come. Like it's an ability to give them their portion of the role and keep control and the direction around what is ours to manage, because we're professionals. We know what
Right,
we're doing. We are evidence-based. We
right.
have reasons why we wanna do things. So, I didn't really answer your I got lost in this other thing, but, for sure relationships with IT. I mean, anymore, so much of what we're doing is reliant on, the MarTech
Yeah,
component, and it has to be able to integrate. We have to have interoperability. We
right.
have to understand what workflows look like, right?
Mhm.
From both the clinical side and the IT side and the operations side. Getting to know, those operations teams, those practice managers, or those service line leaders and what pressures they're under. The patient experience folks, whoever's responsible for patient experience, whether that's nursing or if it's got its own group that's working on it, maybe it's within marketing. How are we measuring that? How are we
Right.
thinking about that, right? Delivery of on the promise. And then, of course, the finance folks ultimately, in some organizations, they wield a lot of power. And if
Yes,
they can
you.
understand that you are looking at marketing as a growth engine or as a margin generator, not just a
Yes.
visits generator, but a margin generator, express the interest in understanding how we're measuring success and
Mhm.
aligning to that, they will be much more supportive than if you're off in a corner doing something that they are not aware of. So
Ye right.
I think it's an overtime thing, right? And building coalitions. Like you don't have to get everybody to know and believe everything. Your job is not to persuade everybody, but it is to find those allies and find those champions
Mhm.
and stay connected with them and, lean on them
Yeah.
when needed to pre-sell, right? Pre-sell the
Right.
work, pre-sell the concept,
Mhm.
get them buying in,
Yeah.
involve people in the development of creative and of campaign planning so that they don't feel like, oh, this is something that marketing's doing. It's like, oh, no, we as an organization are doing this. It
Right.
can be really powerful. So,
It is. Yeah, I think I met with a team from a small critical access hospital last week, and one of the things they said was, "Oh, we're only seen as a cost center." And I think that is a familiar sentiment. I've certainly felt that in my career as well. It can start as simply as if you're at the manager's meeting for the week and they go around the table, capitalize on that moment to say something more than a bulletin board post,
wow.
say something like, "Oh, we have an orthopedics campaign, digital campaign in market, and we have seen X new phone calls." And certainly with the clients we work with and the way I always operated inside the entity was I would go, and if we couldn't measure direct attribution, we could get directional input and say,
Funnel
"Okay, this
filling.
is the setter. This is the gal answering the phone. How many what has been the average new calls for the last 6 months? How we're in market, has that changed at all?" And that action alone, which required one phone call, has made a huge difference. Oh, by the way, this other organization that I was working with, they ended up getting more budget and more respect and more time with the key decision makers because it did result in so many more phone calls. It exceeded the expectations. It wasn't just, let's talk about cardiology.
Right.
You go find out where are the levels at now? What are your goal levels? Get a baseline
All of
before
that.
you launch anything, and even just directional feedback makes everybody at the table go, "Oh,
Yes.
oh, I just thought it was busy because it's heart month," whatever.
Right. And then, to your point, like who is answering the phone when someone make sure they know about it in
Yes.
advance, right? Get their perspective and then they're your partner in reporting on it.
Mhm.
How do we modify? How do we,
Sure.
you're absolutely right about getting the baseline data before launching a campaign so that you can show incremental, whatever it is, right? And you're right, we can't always track it all the way from campaign, whether it's a click or a phone call, directly to downstream revenue. But you can show indicators. You can show, and I think you have the opportunity to educate along the way about what the role of marketing is, right? We get to get the funnel to this point, and then we're doing the handoff. Then that's when the baton gets handed over to operations. And so let's make sure before we launch this campaign, you all have we want to set you up for success.
Right.
Well, let's talk about, what does that patient experience look like? Are there any tweaks we should make before we launch this campaign?
Right.
Hey, we really need you to keep in touch with us so that we can throttle back if we need to, so that we don't create a negative experience.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
can we agree that we're going to touch base weekly and you're going to give us an update on what you're hearing and seeing?
So good.
Building those
So
relationships makes you so much more effective.
And that's all it really means to be strategic. It's not this endowed genetic thing that some
not.
people have and others don't. And it doesn't come with a certain degree or whatever. It just means that before I decide we're going to put a billboard up for a care line that requires a referral from their primary physician, I'm going to ask some questions and not
Ask some questions. Right.
your billboard should not be for a podiatrist because they don't have access already. It is impossible to get in there, but we haven't give podiatry love. I'm like, okay, but your billboard should be for more evergreen. And that's truly the kinds of strategic decisions
Yeah.
that will come from these conversations and
Yeah.
will make you more effective. And it actually will make you more excited about your work
It
because
really will.
you
It will
begin to
make it
see.
more interesting, right? And I
Yes.
think one other question or line of questioning that can be really helpful, and it is a little bit, delicate, but
Mhm.
sometimes when they make, your business partners make statements about certain things, be willing to challenge it a little bit, or that's again back to that, say more about that. How are we evaluating that? How do we know that? Because often it is anecdotal. It is one very loud patient that gave a lot of feedback, or one
Yes.
provider who is complaining. Like, can you say more about that? How are we looking at that? How are we measuring it? Have we validated this? How about if we do validate this? What if we do a little survey?
Yeah.
What if we do get a little data, right?
Yeah.
Let's lean in to that idea. I
That's
think
so
that
good.
that can really be helpful.
That's so good. Well, I already talked to Layla about having another conversation on another day about data and
Yes.
research because the inner geeks in us connected on that as well. And we want to talk about, how do you measure what matters and what are the most important questions to ask? And also to understand that data can inform differently depending on what you're asking of it, what you're looking to do,
Right.
and where do you know which body of data to use or not use or how to address it. So we're excited about that conversation another day. But
Looking
before we sign
forward
off,
to that.
show me your mug. I have my strawberry mug because I am a gardener. I love to garden, and my dogs love strawberries. They go out and pick them all and eat them. So this reminds me, actually, you can see one little dog right there,
Oh, I
Tilly
see
girl.
him.
It's a
Hello.
dog-friendly cafe.
Love it. This is my logo. This is the
Oh,
Strategy for
love
Hire
it.
logo. You can
Strategy
see
for
the
hire.
S, you can see the H, you can see the dots that are getting connected.
Mm,
So,
brilliant.
purple's my color. I wore
Love it.
purple for you. I thought I'd do a little, be true to my brand, and
Yeah,
plus I'm sipping hot tea in the afternoon
I
up
know,
in
me
northern
too.
Michigan where it's very, very cold out. So,
Yeah, I have licorice and mint together. It's
mm,
so yum.
I have
So yum.
just mint. So,
Mm.
cheers. Yeah.
Yes. Cheers. Cheers, cheers. Well, Layla, thanks for being with us. I know we could probably go on and on, but we won't do that. But it's such an honor to visit with you. And if people want to connect with you or learn more or find strategy for hire, where should they look?
Probably the easiest way is on LinkedIn. I
Okay.
am there pretty regularly, but also strategyforhire.com, and
Okay.
it's Lila at strategyforhire.com. So it's
Yeah.
pretty straightforward.
Perfect.
And yeah, I welcome that. I'm eager to connect with folks. That's
Yeah.
what I do. So
Yeah. And she's very generous. So you'll love to follow. Thanks for joining us, listeners. And we appreciate you tuning in. If you liked this message helpful, share it with someone else. And don't forget, we're dropping fresh brewed conversations every other week. And if you want to check them out, we're on Spotify or Apple or YouTube or at theleadershipcafe.com. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Sally.